Hello everyone, and welcome back. There are moments in life when everything becomes very quiet, moments when a person stands at the edge between continuing and letting go. Today, we are exploring one of the most mysterious experiences reported by those who have reached that threshold and returned, the near-death experience, often described as vivid, emotional, and deeply transformative. A near-death experience, or NDE, typically occurs when a person comes extremely close to losing consciousness or being physically unresponsive but is later revived or stabilized. What makes these accounts fascinating is not only their intensity, but also the remarkable similarities among people who come from different cultures, beliefs, and backgrounds. Many describe the experience as clearer than a dream, yet calmer than waking life, something that feels both familiar and completely beyond ordinary understanding. In these moments, individuals often report a sensation of leaving their physical bodies behind. They describe being aware of their surroundings, yet not confined by the usual limits of vision, movement, or weight. Some recount observing themselves from above, as though watching events unfold from a gentle distance. Despite the seriousness of the situation around them, the emotional tone of the experience is frequently calm, peaceful, and free from panic. This separation from the physical body is only the beginning of what many describe. The experience carries a sense of clarity, an awareness that feels expanded rather than reduced. People often describe an impression that they are moving or being drawn somewhere, though not in a way that involves effort or fear. Instead, it feels natural, quiet, and deeply comforting. What makes these accounts so compelling is how consistently they appear across time and place. People who have never heard of such experiences still describe them with familiar patterns and symbols. Scientists, spiritual practitioners, and philosophers continue to study and discuss these stories, but no single explanation has fully captured their depth. And perhaps that is part of the mystery, the sense that, for a brief moment, the boundary between here and elsewhere becomes thin enough to glimpse through. One of the most commonly described features of a near-death experience is the sense of leaving the physical body. People often say it begins without effort. There is no struggle, no decision, just a quiet shift. They describe it as if their awareness gently steps back and views the scene from a new angle. Instead of looking out through their eyes, they feel as though they are observing from above or from a small distance away. What is striking about these accounts is the clarity of perception. Individuals recall details that, under ordinary circumstances, they should not have been able to see or hear. They might describe the layout of the room, the exact positioning of objects, or the expressions of people nearby. Yet in that moment, they feel no fear or confusion. There is a sense of neutrality, almost like watching a scene unfold in stillness. Some describe this state as incredibly light, as though the weight of the body has been set down. Others mention a sense of freedom, not in the emotional sense, but in the absence of physical limitation. They report being able to move without moving, to see without turning, to observe without the usual effort of focusing. And while the experience varies from person to person, many emphasize that this separation does not feel strange. Instead, it feels natural, as if they have simply remembered something they had forgotten. Time feels different, too. Moments stretch, pause, or unfold without urgency. This sense of observing from outside the body has sparked ongoing discussions among researchers, doctors, and philosophers. Some suggest it may be the brain attempting to process overwhelming stress. Others believe it hints at a form of consciousness that is not strictly bound to the physical form. No conclusion has been universally accepted, and perhaps part of the power of these accounts is exactly that. They leave space for wonder. Among the many accounts of near-death experiences, one image returns again and again: the tunnel. People describe it not as a physical corridor, but as a passage of sensation and direction. Some say it feels like being gently drawn forward. Others describe it as moving effortlessly, without the need to walk or push. The tunnel may appear dark at first, but it is never frightening. Instead, it feels like a natural transition, as though moving from one familiar room into another. At the far end of this tunnel, there is often a light, not just any light, but one that people describe with remarkable consistency: warm, soft, and deeply welcoming. It does not glare or overwhelm. Instead, the light seems to carry a presence, something that feels alive, aware, and understanding. Many say they felt recognized before they could form thoughts. There is a sense of being known completely, without the need to speak or explain. The movement toward the light is described as peaceful. There is no rush, no pressure, just a gentle pull, like being carried by a quiet current. People often emphasize the emotional tone of the experience, not excitement or urgency, but an expansive calm, a sense that everything is okay and always has been. Some describe the tunnel as narrow. Others say it is wide, spacious, or filled with patterns. The details vary, but the essence remains consistent. The light feels like a destination, a place where one belongs, or perhaps a place one remembers. Scientists have suggested that the tunnel and light could be linked to how the brain processes vision under stress. Others interpret the imagery as symbolic, a journey from one state of being to another. And there are those who believe it is simply what it appears to be, a passage towards something beyond. The striking thing is how many people, across cultures and decades, describe the same path, the same movement, the same light waiting at the end. Those who reach the light in a near-death experience frequently describe it not simply as brightness, but as a presence, something that feels aware, gentle, and deeply familiar. The light is rarely harsh or blinding. Instead, it carries a warmth that is often compared to sunlight filtered through closed eyelids, soft and comforting. But beyond its visual quality, what people seem to remember most is the feeling it imparts. They describe a sense of being seen completely, yet without judgment or expectation. Some say it feels like being welcomed home after a long journey, even though they cannot explain where that home might be. Others compare the feeling to being embraced not physically, but emotionally held in safety and understanding. This presence in the light does not speak in words, at least not in the way we understand speech. Instead, communication is described as immediate and intuitive, like thoughts or meaning flowing directly into awareness. People recall understanding that they were not alone and that the light somehow recognized them, every memory, every feeling, every moment of their life, yet offered only acceptance and peace. There is no sense of time in this space. Some say that a single moment in the light felt expansive, endless, yet simple and calm. Others describe a clarity so complete that questions they had carried for years seemed to dissolve the instant they appeared, not answered, just no longer necessary. For many, this encounter becomes the emotional core of the near-death experience. Whether they interpreted it later as a spiritual presence, a memory held in the subconscious, or a neurological response, the impact is often profound. People return with a changed understanding of comfort, connection, and what it means to be known. What stands out is that the light is not described as distant or unreachable. It is close, personal, familiar, as though it had always been there, waiting quietly, just beyond the edge of ordinary awareness. Another aspect, often described in near-death experiences, is the encounter with familiar figures. Many people say they saw relatives who had passed away, standing or appearing near the light. These figures are not always detailed in a physical sense. Sometimes their presence is recognized more by feeling than by form. People describe an immediate certainty, a quiet recognition. I knew it was them. These encounters rarely resemble ordinary conversations. Instead, communication seems to unfold through emotion, memory, and understanding. There are no spoken words, yet meaning comes through clearly. Some describe being greeted with warmth, as though these figures were welcoming them gently. Others recall an unspoken message of reassurance. You are safe. You are known. You are not alone. The emotional atmosphere of these encounters is almost always peaceful. There is no urgency, no fear, no confusion. The figures often appear calm, patient, and steady, as if simply being present is enough. Even when the individuals had complicated relationships with these loved ones during life, the encounter is described as free of tension. The feelings are softened, distilled into connection rather than memory. In many accounts, these figures seem to play a role in guiding what happens next. Some people describe being gently encouraged to continue toward the light. Others recall being told again, without spoken words, that it is not yet time to stay. The return to the physical world, for some, feels like being slowly guided back, or simply allowed to drift toward awareness again. Different cultures interpret these figures in different ways. Some see them as ancestors. Others describe them as spiritual guides, guardians, or symbols of memory and love. And some explain the experience as the mind drawing upon its deepest emotional connections in a moment of transition. What remains consistent is the sense of recognition, the feeling of being welcomed by something known, familiar, and deeply meaningful. It is this emotional clarity that many people remember most vividly when they return. Another striking element reported in near-death experiences is the life review. Many people describe an unfolding of memories not as a blur, but with extraordinary clarity. These memories do not come in fragments or confusion. Instead, they appear with vivid detail, including moments long forgotten. People say it feels as though they are observing their life from a place outside of time, seeing events not from their own perspective alone, but from a broader and gentler viewpoint. The life review is not described as judgment. There is no sense of being evaluated or measured. Instead, it feels like an opportunity to understand. Moments from childhood, conversations once overlooked, small decisions made without much thought, all of these can reappear. People recall noticing the emotional impact of their actions, not only on themselves but on others. It is as if the experience widens awareness, allowing them to feel what another person may have felt in that moment. Some describe this review as flowing like a story, unfolding smoothly. Others say it comes as impressions or scenes that open and close like doors. There is no rush, even if it happens quickly. Time behaves differently here, expansive, flexible, unbounded. What stands out is the tone of the experience. It is not harsh, not critical. Many describe it as compassionate and deeply instructive, as though they are being shown something with care. The purpose does not seem to be regret or praise, but recognition, an understanding of connection, influence, and shared experience. After returning, people often say that this life review changes how they see their daily actions. Small gestures feel more meaningful. Words carry more weight. Relationships feel more delicate and important. The experience suggests, to many, that life is composed of countless quiet moments of impact, moments that continue to resonate long after they pass. Whether interpreted spiritually, symbolically, or neurologically, this life review remains one of the most profound and lasting elements of the near-death narrative. It leaves people not only remembering their lives, but re-seeing them. One of the most consistent themes across near-death experiences is the profound peace people describe. Despite the circumstances surrounding the moment, often urgent, overwhelming, or physically intense, the inner experience is almost the opposite. Many say that the noise of the world fades away, replaced by a calm that feels deep and steady. It is not simply the absence of worry. It is a presence in itself, a quiet clarity that feels complete. People often describe the peace as something they did not know they were missing. It does not feel like a reaction to the situation, but like stepping into a state that was always there, waiting beneath the surface of everyday life. Some use words like lightness, stillness, or openness. Others say that thoughts become simple, clean, and uncluttered. There is no pressure to understand, to decide, or to do. Everything just is. Alongside this peace, many describe clarity, a sense that things make sense in a way they never had before. There are no puzzles to solve, no doubts to manage. It feels like understanding without having to search for answers. Some say it is like waking up from a long, complicated dream and realizing that reality is far simpler than it seemed. The calmness of the experience often stands in contrast to how people might imagine such a moment. There is no sensation of resistance, no sense of being forced forward or held back. Instead, people describe a gentle acceptance, as though they are floating in a state that requires nothing from them. After returning, this is often the part people struggle most to explain. The peace does not feel like an emotion, but like a state of being, something beyond language. Many spend years trying to describe it, yet feel words only trace the outline of what was felt. What remains is the memory of that peace, steady, quiet, and enduring, often influencing the rest of a person's life. Although near-death experiences occur across different countries, languages, and belief systems, the core elements remain surprisingly consistent. People describe separation from the body, movement through a tunnel, the presence of light, and deep feelings of peace. However, the way individuals interpret these experiences often reflects their cultural or spiritual background. For example, in cultures where ancestors are honored and remembered, people may describe meeting loved ones who have passed on, standing as guides or greeters. In places where religious figures hold strong, symbolic meaning, the light may be described as a divine presence or a guiding being. In more secular or non-religious contexts, individuals may describe the experience in terms of energy, awareness, or consciousness, without attaching any specific identity to it. These interpretations do not diminish the shared qualities of the experience, they simply shape the language used to describe it. A person raised without spiritual beliefs may still describe the light as comforting and aware, even if they hesitate to name it. Someone raised within a deeply religious tradition may use familiar names or imagery to explain what they encountered. The emotional tone remains remarkably consistent: acceptance, clarity, and connection. Researchers who study near-death experiences have noted this pattern for decades. The narrative details shift, but the structure remains nearly universal. This has led to different perspectives. Some suggest that the experience is rooted in the human brain and therefore expresses itself through cultural memory. Others argue that the shared core reveals something fundamental about human consciousness that transcends culture altogether. Yet, perhaps what matters most is how people feel when they return. Regardless of the interpretation, individuals often carry a renewed sense of openness and empathy. Their understanding of life tends to broaden. They become less concerned with division and more attentive to connection. In this way, the near-death experience acts like a mirror, not reflecting belief, but revealing the deeply human desire to understand where we come from, where we go, and what it means to be aware in the space between. While near-death experiences are often described in deeply personal and emotional terms, scientific research has tried to understand them through the functioning of the brain. One of the most common explanations focuses on oxygen deprivation. When the brain does not receive enough oxygen, such as during cardiac arrest or trauma, it may produce vivid imagery, intense sensations, and altered states of awareness. The tunnel effect, for example, has been linked to the way the visual field narrows under low oxygen, creating the impression of moving toward light. Another explanation involves neurochemical responses. Under stress, the brain releases a variety of chemicals that can alter perception, memory, and consciousness. Some of these chemicals can create feelings of euphoria, peace, or detachment from the body. Researchers suggest that the brain may use these mechanisms as a protective response, softening the experience of physical crisis by creating a sense of calm and distance. Some scientists also look at brainwave activity during moments when consciousness appears to fade. In several studies, even after the body seems unresponsive, the brain shows brief bursts of activity surges that could create vivid internal experiences. These bursts may lead to memories that feel clearer than waking life, because they occur when the brain is focusing intensely. However, there are aspects of near-death experiences that challenge purely neurological explanations. Some individuals recall details of events around them that they should not have been physically able to see or hear. Others describe experiences that feel more structured, coherent, and meaningful than typical dreams or hallucinations. Because of this, the scientific conversation remains open. Some researchers argue that the brain alone can account for everything reported. Others suggest that there may be elements of consciousness that extend beyond physical processes. There is ongoing debate, ongoing study, and ongoing curiosity. What is clear is that near-death experiences sit at a point where biology and meaning overlap. Even if science can explain how the experience occurs, that does not erase the impact it leaves, an impact that continues long after the moment has passed. Beyond scientific explanations, many people interpret near-death experiences through a spiritual or metaphysical lens. For them, the sense of leaving the body, meeting loved ones, and moving toward a comforting light suggests not a hallucination, but a transition, an opening into another form of existence. They describe the experience as more real than waking life, as if they briefly stepped into a deeper layer of reality rather than leaving it. In this interpretation, the tunnel is not just a visual effect, it is a pathway. The light is not just brightness, it is presence. The life review is not the brain firing memories, but an invitation to understand and integrate one's journey. These elements are seen as steps in a process, a moment of movement between states of awareness. Some traditions speak of the soul continuing after physical life. Others describe consciousness as something that does not depend entirely on the brain. In these worldviews, the near-death experience provides a rare look at what usually remains unseen. For those who have had the experience, the feeling of connection, peace, and recognition often carries more weight than any analysis could. They return with a sense that what they encountered was not imagined, but remembered. Even people who did not previously hold spiritual beliefs sometimes describe their experience in terms that sound spiritual. The light felt wise, the peace felt unconditional, the presence felt familiar. They struggled to explain it in ordinary language, because the experience did not feel symbolic, it felt direct. This interpretation does not demand that everyone believe in an afterlife. Instead, it asks a quieter question. What if consciousness is wider than we think? What if what we call life is only part of a larger landscape? Whether accepted or questioned, the spiritual interpretation highlights a simple truth found across thousands of accounts. The experience feels meaningful. It changes how people think about existence, not through teaching or doctrine, but through direct encounter. One of the most compelling aspects of near-death experiences is not only what happens in the moment, but what happens after. Many individuals who return describe a noticeable shift in how they view their lives. These changes are often subtle at first, but grow stronger over time, shaping the way they think, feel, and act. For some, the experience brings a new sense of clarity about what matters. Everyday frustrations that once felt heavy may lose their power. People often say that small worries seem less important, while connection, kindness, and presence feel more meaningful. There is a renewed appreciation for simplicity. Moments that were once overlooked now feel rich and full. Others report a deepened sense of compassion. Having felt what they describe as unconditional understanding during the experience, they often try to extend that understanding to others. They become more patient, more open, more willing to listen. They may feel drawn to helping or to living in a way that feels more authentic and grounded. For some, the change comes in the form of reduced fear. The experience of peace in the threshold moment can soften the fear of the unknown. This does not mean they seek risk or challenge. Rather, they move through life with a steadier sense of calm. They see uncertainty not as something to avoid, but as a natural part of being alive. These shifts do not come with dramatic declarations or sudden transformations. Instead, they settle slowly, like light filtering through leaves. They reshape priorities, guiding people toward relationships, experiences, and choices that feel more aligned with what they now understand. Researchers have noticed that these changes are difficult to explain through biology alone. They are not simply emotional reactions or psychological coping. They are enduring, consistent, and often life-defining. Whether interpreted spiritually or scientifically, the impact remains the same. The experience leaves something behind, something steady, quiet, and real. It is this afterward, perhaps, that makes near-death experiences not only mysterious, but deeply human. Near-death experiences remain one of the most discussed and complex subjects because they touch many different areas of understanding at once. On one side, doctors and scientists study the brain, chemistry, and memory to understand how consciousness behaves under extreme stress. On another side, philosophers and spiritual traditions consider what it means to be aware, to feel, and to recognize presence. And in the middle are the people who lived through these moments, who describe something that feels undeniably real to them, even if it defies easy explanation. The debate often begins with a simple question: what exactly is consciousness? If it is only a product of the brain, then near-death experiences could be internal responses to crisis. But if consciousness has aspects that are not fully tied to physical processes, then these experiences may reveal something beyond the material world. This is where conversation becomes layered, subtle, and deeply human. Psychologists note that NDS often create lasting emotional change, suggesting that the experience touches something meaningful, regardless of origin. Neuroscientists study measurable brain activity and look for patterns that could explain the tunnel, the light, and the sense of peace. Meanwhile, individuals who experienced NDEs often say that the event did not feel like imagination, dream, or memory. It felt clearer than waking life. Because these perspectives rely on different forms of evidence, the discussion continues without a single conclusion. And perhaps the reason the topic remains alive is that it raises questions that are not purely scientific or purely spiritual. Questions about what it means to be aware, about where experience begins and where it ends, about whether the mind and the body are inseparable or simply companions. The near-death experience, in this sense, acts like a quiet mirror held up to humanity's oldest curiosity. What lies just beyond the edge of what we can observe? The answer remains open, not as uncertainty, but as invitation. When we look at near-death experiences as a whole, we find something subtle but deeply consistent. The details vary from person to person, shaped by memory, culture, and belief. Yet the core themes remain steady across time and place, a sense of leaving the physical body to movement toward a gentle light, encounters filled with understanding, and a feeling of peace that many say they had never known before. Whether interpreted through science, spirituality, or a place in between, these experiences remind us of something universal: the human desire to understand what lies beyond the limits of ordinary awareness. Perhaps the meaning of near-death experiences does not rest in proving one explanation over another. Instead, it may rest in what these experiences leave behind: greater compassion, deeper presence, and a softened view of life's uncertainties. For many who return, the world feels both familiar and new, as though something quiet but profoundly real has shifted inside them. We may not have a final answer, and maybe we do not need one. The mystery itself encourages reflection, gentleness, and curiosity. It invites us to look at our days with more attention, to notice the simple connections that shape our lives. Thank you for spending this time exploring with me. If you found value in this conversation, I invite you to stay, to listen, and to continue the journey with an open mind and a steady heart. See you in the next story. SEO description 200 words. English. For the title, At the Threshold, the Light Seen by Those Who Return. In this episode, we explore one of the most quietly profound human experiences, the moment at the edge of life, and the stories of those who came back. Across cultures and across time, people who have approached this threshold describe something surprisingly consistent: an awareness separate from the body, a gentle movement through darkness, and the presence of a warm, understanding light. Some speak of meeting loved ones. Others describe a peace deeper than anything they had known before. Whether interpreted through science, spirituality, or personal reflection, these experiences shape how many think about consciousness, meaning, and the nature of existence. This is not an attempt to prove or disprove. Instead, it is an invitation to listen to, consider what these stories reveal about how we understand ourselves and the world. A quiet story, told with care, about what it means to be aware at the very edge of life.